Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Bridge of Love. My name is Erin Cameron, and I'll be your host. Today's episode is for the caregivers. We are talking about caregiving in the fifth dimension. So, what is caregiving? Wikipedia would say it is a paid or unpaid person who helps an individual with activities of daily living. If you haven't ever heard of those, that's everything that they need to get through the day. My definition of caregiving is when you're giving of your own time and energy in the service of another out of love or for other reasons, which you initially enter into willingly. And then one day you look around and wonder why you chose it and how you can get out of it. Sort of joking, sort of not, my definition. And it's funny, I told myself I wanted to make an episode on caregiving, and it just sort of kind of came up in my reality in recent months, in conversations and things like that, as well as my own life. It just amped up. So that's what I've been doing, and it's kind of this last round of it in this last number of months has really deepened my experience of it. And I just find that funny that when I think about I want to do an episode on caregiving, it kind of became more of a thing in my life. Essentially, we had to change insurances and we had to change nursing agencies, and everything got jumbled. And that just means that as her parents, we were really taking on more for a little while there. So that happens, and it's just another level and of understanding how to be more at peace with it and within it and within the experience. Um, and so I was just making this episode better, I guess. And so that's kind of where we've been at, where I've been recently, and also just enjoying the summer, right? It's my favorite. So, this episode is about my journey of allowing a higher perspective into the experience of being a caregiver and using that to create some practical tips that I apply in my life and that I think were really helpful. So, let's start with my journey. It started with one of outer focus, being very focused on what I could see outside of myself versus what I was feeling on the inside, which I would consider my vibration or the frequency in which I live. Also, this we're just kind of starting in the beginning of my journey, so trying to lead you through. This is where it started. It all started here. An outer focus. The need to fix or change or improve life for my daughter, I really saw this as my major role. And this is where I would say, enter super mom. That's where that role came from, right? Um, Within this is, giving all of myself, maximum energy expenditure. And why was, I saw it as a challenge that I wanted to rise to from the minute I had her. And I wanted to meet that challenge at all costs, which of course ended up being too much for one person. And also seeing Hadden as limited and seeing our life as limited. And I'm sure many in my type of situation can identify with that. That's kind of the obvious starting point. It's like, oh, crap, can't do the things I thought we were going to be able to do. And, it just doesn't look like you thought it was going to look. And so that idea of limitation arises. There were beliefs, deep-seated beliefs of what it means to be disabled. And thank goodness those have transformed. I was comparing to others, a lot of comparison to others and their kids, their lives, all of it, because it was and is so drastically different to be us. That was an easy one to get into. And lastly, doing all of it myself. And perfectionism is in there somewhere too. So that's a lot to take on, and I did. And I would identify all of this as the third dimension. And I'm bringing up dimensions now because it just makes it easy for me to describe a journey in the spiritual sense. So the dimension, and these are all accessible now in the moment. They're all here now. It's not physical places. These are dimensions that we can choose in any moment. They're all here now. And it's just your thoughts and your consciousness that determine that, and your vibration. So the third dimension is where everything happens to you, where you're separate from others, separate from your own power source, reacting to the outside world, to your conditions. And for me, I learned a lot while I was in this perspective and ultimately reached a point where I was ready to move on from it. My indicator of that being, ready to move on was stress. I hit my physical, mental, emotional, and not even knowing it at the time, my spiritual limits in the third dimension. And just briefly, I'd also like to describe what I experienced as the fourth dimension of consciousness in this experience. This is a dimension of doing, changing, healing, what I see as all of the action steps that the third dimension necessitates. So this is where I made all of the outer changes I could to our lives in order to alleviate some of the stress I had taken on, and what I saw at the time as creating more balance in my own life. We moved to California from Colorado, where we were and are able to live closer to family and build a more stable foundation for both Hadden and I. And that was great and has been great. I had more help than ever with her. But I eventually reached this point where I realized that even though I had moved across the country, left our old life behind, left all my problems behind, right? I wasn't that much happier on the inside. Something was missing. And I didn't really see the entirety of my dream life materializing in front of me as I totally expected. I was like, I'm here. I did this big thing. I moved us across the country. Okay, I'm ready for all of it to be amazing. And I saw that potential after we moved here, but it just wasn't happening. It felt like that saying, wherever you go, there you are. There I was, with all of my problems, the same problems, right? But because the journey is an inner one, of course. So wherever you go, there you are. And that definitely happened. And at some point along the way of trying to make this dream life that we all have a reality, I reached my capacity for fear, anger, resentment, worry, self-judgment, and all of these emotions served me in the third and fourth dimensions. Even Hadden described them in her messages as something our souls wanted to go through in order to feel human. She was also very clear that I couldn't take any of those with me into the fifth dimension. So, I tried to take that from her messages and, okay, all right, I see I have all of these reactions and emotions to what is obviously something that everyone would probably react that way to. Our life wasn't easy. And so once I received everything I could from those experiences in the third and fourth dimensions, this is how I see it now, I was able to move on from them vibrationally. So, how did I do that? I thanked them. I received their gifts, meaning I now feel a sense of gratefulness for those experiences because through them I became resilient. I became a super mom and I became an unwavering advocate for my daughter. And those qualities are still a part of me. Luckily, that entire period of my life was also filled with a ton of love because of my connection to Hadden. I eventually realized that all of these difficult emotions and experiences came from love. Anytime you're worried about someone, I've said this before in previous episode, underneath that worry and that fear, if they're in the hospital, for example, is love. And from that realization, I was able to fully receive the gifts within them. It reminds me of Ariana Grande's song, Thank You Next. That was my thank you next moment. Realizing, okay, I've done all I can in the third and fourth dimensions. Our life is as good as we're gonna get it. So that was my journey through those. So now I live with Hadden in the fifth dimension of consciousness, where everything and everyone is pure love. And I'd like to focus on caregiving today from this perspective. So, being a caregiver has obviously been a huge part of my life and my job for the last 16, almost 17 years. But when I thought about doing this episode, it came to me that we will all, or most of us, become caregivers at some point in our lives. I see it as something that's fairly common in the human experience because, and when I think about why it's so common, what comes to me is that, we never intended to do this life alone. Um, and also because within the experience of caregiving is love. Because in giving you ultimately receive. And I think that's just our natural tendency as humans to want to help each other when we need, when others need it. So, examples of like your family member is sick for a few weeks or breaks a bone or has an eye surgery. And you do their laundry, you cook, you bring them things, run errands for them, drive them places, spend time with them, and allow them the time it takes to get better. And you do all of this because you love them and you have a choice. Around the time I started to learn to channel, I was following a few of my favorite channels, and one of them is Matt Kahn. And I was listening to a group call of his one day, and so Matt is a pretty well-known spiritual author and teacher, and one of his defining phrases and a title of one of his books is "All for Love." So that's his thing, that everything is for love. I'm listening to this call, and a woman on the call was essentially asking how how to best deal with her role as a caregiver for her elderly relative whom she loved. Um, but I could tell she was pretty burned out, and I'm an expert in burnout, so I recognized it from a mile away. And she just was lost in it. Like, how do I feel good about this? It's burning me out, right? And his answer was really brief and to the point. He said to get up every day and choose it. And I was honestly kind of triggered by the answer. And at that point, something inside of me said, I'm going to figure out the full answer to that question for that lady, for me, for anyone else who wants it. Um, and now I know what he meant. Even though at the time it seemed to me to be an incomplete answer, he meant to be aware, and this is what I think, he meant to be aware that you do have a choice. And in the awareness that on some level you chose to help that person in your life out of love, there is a recognition of the love you have for them and the love and other gifts you will ultimately receive from the experience. So he was really representing the higher perspective here, but I felt as a caregiver that there was more to learn before being able to really get there. And I think I wasn't quite there, and that lady didn't seem like she was quite there. Um, so yeah, Matt Kahn is up there. So um, he's amazing. So this is what I've learned beyond recognizing that we have a choice, is that outside of this choice, if the experience is uncomfortable, there's an opportunity. For me, the opportunity was to find the vibration of love within myself before giving myself, meaning my time and my energy to my daughter. Or said another way, to consciously be in the vibration of love while caregiving. And I can't say how much I was ever doing that before I came to this realization. I saw it as a job. I saw it as do the best thing you can until you get a break, and then it's done. And thank goodness, it was just a very different approach that I had before I learned all of this. So this has been a really powerful practice for me. And as I said before, I also took it as an opportunity to ask Hadden's higher self, why did I choose this? Why did we choose this experience? And so I'll answer that at the end of the episode, because that's one of my favorite parts. And so back to this choice, I see it as one that happened on a soul level for me, but also on the human level. I choose every day to be there for her as much as possible. I choose it as my primary job. I can see how those aren't necessarily soul level choices. I could go get another job and pay other people to care for her, for example. And as much as I've actually said I'll do that one day, so far I haven't made that choice. So for me, in the discomfort of the third dimension, the opportunities were essentially the way into the fifth dimension. So the problems of the third dimension are opportunities in the fifth dimension, or to get to the fifth dimension, if that makes sense. And for me, these were allowing others to help me. Big one. Acceptance of our situation in general, and seeing the higher truth in every aspect of the experience. These are all very umbrella concepts. So if we apply these concepts to the examples of being in the third dimension that I mentioned in the first part of the episode. That outer focus, that was solved by me focusing on being in the vibration of love within myself while caregiving. So it's one thing to be in the vibration of love when you're by yourself and there's no one else to worry about, but really getting there and holding that in the space of another. And honestly, it's not that hard in Hadden's presence because that's where she exists. So not really that hard, but it does make you way more aware of your own vibration and your own needs. And I'll get back to that. Another application is, to those third dimensional, that journey. I no longer felt the need to change or fix her or our life because of the deep level of acceptance that I reached. And I could do an entire episode on what it means to accept things as they are. Acceptance is really part of knowing the divine nature of everything and that it has a purpose. And finally, once I was able to see things from a higher perspective, all of the other problems of the third dimension dissipated. All the other things on that list, I no longer give too much of myself. Or suffer from major perfectionism when it comes to her care. I've really done a lot of work around letting go and letting other people do it their way. That was a journey. So I also no longer see Hadden or our life as limited. And my example of that is of that belief is I used to think that because she's disabled, I couldn't travel. That I was stuck at home, that I couldn't leave her for more than a few days. And of course, I've come to know that this is just, this is just not the case. She's totally fine without me. And now I travel whenever I want. And I also know that there will be times when we travel together. It's all possible now. In the fifth dimension, a whole lot of other possibilities arise when you let go of some of those old beliefs. My beliefs around what it means to be disabled have changed entirely. Like I said, thank goodness, which also really helped me let go of comparing all of the comparison to others. Really, that's just been so powerful to see the value of her just the way she is. And I just can't overstate that one. It's amazing. So, wow, I feel so much lighter now, and I get to use all of the energy that used to go into those beliefs and create this new world that we live in, where everything is amazing, magical, meaningful. And that doesn't mean I don't have difficulty in the caregiving realm, in that job. It's not an easy one, but I've gotten pretty good at it. And all of this has helped me navigate through the times where I'm on more than I really want to be. Like if we don't have a nurse for a few days, it helps me navigate those times with a greater ease for sure. And without drinking a bottle of wine every night to get through it. It's really just making the whole experience, more comfortable and fulfilling for sure. So let's bring all of this into a few really practical tips, just a few that I apply to my life all the time. My first one being allowing others to help. Huge for me, and continuing and along this line, continuing to receive more help. So it's not a need for help. It's not holy shit, I need more help, I'm dying, right? It's this allowing, it's a state of mind of allowing and receiving. For me, this starts by with being grateful for all the help that I already have, for the nurses that take such amazing care of her all day, and they go to school with her, etc. Like, they are her ticket, and she loves them and they love her, and just seeing that and recognizing that and being so grateful for that every time they, come in the morning, it's just like, yes, I love you. I've called them my angels. I've actually introduced them as that without even realizing it to other people. So just really becoming aware of all the help I already have, and then claiming that Hadden and I have all the help we need and more to live the life we came here for. And now I'm a poet. But that's it. Just allowing all of that help to come in whatever form that might be. So not, limiting how it comes in. And for me, the biggest block to that was just really taking too much of it on myself. So the universe was like, all right, you want to do all this? Go for it. You're becoming really awesome at it. And I did. I totally did. And I will train a nurse better than some nurses. And they've told me that. They're like, let mom train you. She's amazing. So there's value in all of those third dimensional experiences, all kinds of value. What I've found, though, if you want life to sort of move on and move up, is this other dimension of and perception, perspective that you can live from. That's just so much more freeing. And so when you decide, like, yeah, I think I'm done doing all of this because it's just it didn't feel right, and I really did take it on, and not allow, you know, people to help, even ones that were hired to help. I wouldn't even let them do, make her meds and things for weeks. It was just silly. So um, it's all in your perspective, and all whatever you're allowing the universe to sort of bring to you is it will show up. But there is, recognizing what you've chosen really to do, it needs to line up. So if I wanted more help, but I was doing it all and saying how much the nurses sucked or whatever, that didn't line up, right? So everything needs to align. And that was part of my journey, is getting to that point where it does. And the second tip is knowing what I needed to take care of myself, my own vibration, my own energy, really asking those questions like, what do I need? What do I want? What do I really need? Because I'm about to fall over. So as soon as I pushed myself as far as I could and finally realized, oh, and I kind of kept asking that question, and more comes in, and you're able to take care of yourself so that your own cup overflows. Um, I'm more available for Hadden. I'm more available for the other people in my life. And the caregiving comes from an overflow of your energy. And if you can get to that point, that's where it's at. in any relationship. But this one just requires more of one person than the other. And this point is also related to finding that vibration of love within myself. For me, one of my most practical things that I use all the time is when I realize, oh, yeah, how can I really be there for myself more? I just went inside. I would go outside, sit in the sun, and then go inside, if that makes sense. So I'm in my favorite spot in the backyard or whatever, and just closing my eyes and breathing. How often do we really do that? And paying attention to what is in here and what you need for that moment. And honestly, a lot of times it's just to stop and breathe and love yourself. It sounds so simple, but you have so much love available to you from your soul, from yourself, from your human, all of it. It's there for you. You just have to open to it, accept it, receive it, and give that to yourself. Give yourself those moments. That has been a really good practice for me when I'm kind of really stuck in the house, as it were, because sometimes it's hard to get, if I don't have help, get us both out of the house and doing anything outside of the house, and I get a little stir crazy in here. So, um, the so what else? Yeah, the overarching point here is that you can't, or it wasn't intended for you to be there for another person unless you're there for yourself first and during, um, while you're taking care of the other person. That's the gift for me. They teach us how to be there for ourselves. And wow, that was definitely one of the biggest gifts for me. I now see caregiving as such a bonus experience in life. It's bonus love. It's a bonus relationship. I don't that shift in perspective has I just get so much more out of it. And I know she does too. I know Hadden does too. And it's just this flow. The other day we were sitting out in the backyard and I was feeling so good, and she was just sitting kind of, I'm in the sun and she's a little more in the shade, but over by the trees, and we're listening to music. And I remember just feeling so amazing. And I look over and I didn't hardly have to look in her direction, but she could feel my energy and felt me looking at her. And she smiled so big. She just kind of looked at me and smiled and was like, I know, right? Isn't this awesome? It's hard to even explain, but when you get yourself into that vibration, they can feel it, especially kids like Hadden that are so sensitive. So it just comes back to you and your kid being calmer and happier. And this isn't every single day. We all have our reasons for, maybe, she has her reasons for not being calm or whatever, but it just improves the overall experience so much. And to really enjoy those moments of um, everything she's saying in that moment, of how happy she is and uh, how happy she is to be here. So just really taking that in and appreciating it. Um, so ultimately, being a caregiver of a special child or someone that you love deeply adds to your life. And if you can see it that way, especially a kid that is a special kid, and if you can see it that way, the experience will transform. It will transform in your experience of it, but you will also receive more in order to be able to perceive it that way, if that makes sense. So, you're going to, in perceiving it a different way, as it transforms, it's just going to keep showing you more of that. You'll receive more, and it kind of keeps proving itself to be true, if that makes sense. It's just how the universe works and how it's worked for me, that once you see an experience a certain way, it's like your eyes open to see it that way, and you receive more of that proof of how amazing it is. So my final point is to go into what Hadden says when, what she said when I asked her higher self why we choose to be caregivers. Essentially, she said that God wanted to feel that love, to know that love through you. And this came in really strongly from her, that we are seen as caregivers for everything that we give, but ultimately we are seen by the divine for the love that we are allowing to be exchanged and flowed into our experience. That is a thing that we're actually being recognized for, that's valuable in terms of consciousness, in terms of soul evolution. And the divine is also their higher self. So, in that message from her, when it came in, I felt this very strong, like, I see you and we see you, all caregivers. It was like she was representing all special kids. Like, we see you, and what you're doing is amazing, and it is for the divine, like almost like a divine, choice of job, is how I would interpret all of that. Because of through that experience, there is such a strong and unique experience of love for that person. So that's what Hadden said about it. And so I really enjoy communicating with Hadden in those ways, because it just opens me up to a higher perspective. It gives me really practical advice for, I like sort of translate all of that higher perspective into practical things for my everyday life. And I think I've become a better person from it, and just from being around her, like I said. But the messages are just amazing. And it's also helped me communicate with her telepathically, essentially, and helped me just in every day communicate with her better, and recognize the ways that I was communicating with her already in an everyday sense, and kind of really get into, okay, this is our unique way. And she knows that I know what she's saying and what she needs, and that's just continuing to develop, and it's so cool. So if you'd like to learn how to communicate with your loved one in this way, go to my website, erincameron.org, and click on private sessions. I'm now offering a private mentor experience for learning how to communicate nonverbally. And so that would be a 5-session experience. And that's all described more in detail on the website. So check that out if any of this sounds like something that might apply to you in your life. And on that subject, I think if you're taking care of someone that's limited, in my opinion, it's just such a huge gift. I'd just like to close with saying, think about what you're receiving in those moments alone with them. This came to me a few days ago, like, wow, what is the gift in those moments where you think you're stuck with them and you wish you had a nurse to help you, right? But what's the gift in that? For me, it was huge, and I don't think I even realized it at the time, or as I've been her caregiver all these years. But the more have been around her, the more consciousness I eventually came into, and I went through that in an earlier episode. That I really think that that's what they are bringing. These kids that are seemingly limited, that's how we see them. They're so much more than what their physical presence would represent. And if you're a caregiver, you probably know, and you can probably feel that. So my experience is that there's so much there for you to gain from them in connecting on a different level than what we do with other people in our lives, right? It's a different way of connecting. And for me, it's opened up so much possibility. Um, and it really has made the whole experience so interesting. And, consider that that's one of your soul's intentions with placing you in their life, in their, you know, is to gain that soul level evolution and awareness of the different dimensions in which we all exist, how different people exist. My point being, if they need more help in life, they're very likely more so existing in other dimensions, and meaning that that form of communication that you use is important, because if more of them is in a higher dimension, there's just so much more information you can get from them with just a different, basically learning, communicating with them non-verbally, or telepathically, as some might call it. So it becomes, oh, it's not about all these things I have to give to this person so they can get through the day. This little shift in perspective of what I was receiving from the experience, it just lit it up for me. And I have more energy. I don't go to a place of lack around it. And I've learned that none of us really lack anything. Like, that's not the truth of us. Even these kids like Hadden, um, really, truly, they just exist in different proportions of these dimensions. So, meaning different proportions of themselves and their consciousness are connected um, to these higher dimensions than what we're experiencing, possibly, right? We're experiencing life from different dimensions, and if you are in their life, um, I believe that's part of the purpose and the gift, is that you can actually hang out in both places with them. Um, you can be in, uh, one dimension and the other, if that makes sense. So I know, because I do it with Hadden, and that's how I get these messages. I'm here in the proportion of, what dimensions I've chosen to really experience life in, and she's here, but she's also a lot of her in the higher dimensions. And if my opinion is, if you are in their life in this bigger capacity, like an everyday capacity, there's a purpose there, and that you can be in both. You can be that bridge for them, um, and that you are. And uh, I just think that bringing these two dimensions together is why they chose you and why you chose it. That is my experience, and I think it's an incredible one. And I'd love to guide you along that path, to discover your unique way of communicating nonverbally. So thank you for joining me today. And I'm going to be back to caregiving now, because Hadden's bus is here. So love you all. And until the next episode, take care.